Into part two of this. What did you think about part one? Was it pretty incredible? Pretty amazing the things that he's saved for us in these last days, isn't it? Yeah. And guess what? That was just the warm-up for what part two is going to show. Now it gets really good. Okay, we're going to start off with the burnt mountain. It came to pass on the third day in the morning that there were thunders and lightnings, and a thick cloud upon the mount, and the voice of the trumpet exceeding loud, so that all the people that were in the camp trembled. And remember, they're about 6-7 miles away at that campsite from the peak of the mountain. So they're trembling from this site about 7 miles away. And then you remember they backed away to the edge of the campsite, which is another 6 miles. They backed as far away from this as they could because it was so overwhelming and so overpowering. They were fearing for their lives from 14 miles away. When he does something, he goes big. And Mount Sinai was altogether on a smoke. It was smoking because Yah descended upon it in fire. And the smoke thereof ascended as the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mountain quaked greatly. In Judges 5, it says, the mountains melted from before Yah, even that Sinai, as a second witness. Now the mountain in Arabic today is known as Jabal Makla. Arabic, that means burnt mountain. It's about 4 miles south of the Jabal al-Lawz mountain. It's in the Jabal al-Lawz mountain range. So sometimes you'll hear this called Jabal al-Lawz. It is in the Jabal al-Lawz mountain range, but it is not the peak of Jabal al-Lawz, which is a little bit farther north. It's the elevation of the southern peak that we're going to focus on is 7,494 feet tall, about 2,500 feet off of the plain, off of the campsite. This mountain is easily identified by a peak that is covered in blackened rocks. And the local Bedouins have not historically called this Jabal Makla or Burnt Mountain. They've all pointed to this up until very recently as Jabal Musa, the mountain of Moses. Next, this is a picture as we're walking up to it. You can see the burnt mountain peak. The rest of the mountain is that brown color, as are most of the mountains in this area. But the top of this mountain and this mountain alone turns black. A little bit closer up, this is also an archaeological site by Saudi Arabia. An official archaeological site is this mountain. It had a fence around it. It still does in most places, but as you can see, some of the fence has fallen down. Getting closer, you start getting a sense of the awe and majesty of this mountain when you walk up closer and closer to it. All right? Next, so these rocks from the top of Jabal Makla are blackened on the top, and they have a natural brown color on the bottom. And this is not just one or two rocks, it's every single rock that we've seen up there. Now, let's bring on the scoffers for this, right? A scoffer would say, this is a volcanic mountain. Of course, they're blackened rocks. And I'll say, okay, have you ever been to Hawaii and seen Volcanic National Park in the pumice there and the lava that's overflowed the road? The pumice is completely different. It's completely black all the way through, and it's coarse. And even if it's burnt granite, it doesn't happen this way because the granite would be burnt all the way through. Oh, but it wasn't a volcanic eruption, the scoffers would say. It was just a magma chamber underneath the mountaintop, and it was burning the mountain. I say, okay, that's great. It burnt the rock, it would burn the rocks, but it would burn the rocks from below. The rocks would be heated up from the ground, and so the bottoms of the rocks would be blackened. But the difference here is that these rocks were burnt from above. Every single rock is blackened pointing towards the sky and brown pointing towards the ground. This mountain is the only one in this range with a blackened peak. Now we remember when he came down on the third day, this mountain was on smoke. It was smoking, as it said. It was as a furnace. Can you imagine the heat that was being generated? And then smoke, what's smoke of? It's something burning, something being blackened. What's being blackened in the smoke? It was the rocks. The rocks were being blackened by his fire and his furnace coming down when his very physical presence was manifested on the top of this mountain. His glory touched these rocks. His glory burnt these rocks in a way that can't really be determined from analysis that's been done, as far as I know. The physical presence of Yah has touched this mountain. And when our Messiah went into Jerusalem, and the Pharisees said, "Make them stop. Hosanna, Hosanna, make them stop." And he said, if the rocks have to cry out, they will. Or even the rocks have to witness to me, they will. And these rocks witness to the physical manifestation of the glory and the presence of our Creator on the top of this very mountain. Now, this is one of those rocks. Would you like to have this passed around and take a look and touch it and see it? Now, this is not an icon, this is not an idol, but this is a witness to our Creator and what He has done for us at this very mountain, giving us His word, His commandments, His covenant for us to understand and then follow onto His new covenant, which still keeps those commandments as part of it. This is part of our salvation at work right here, and that little rock was a witness to that and felt the presence of our Creator upon him. You can only imagine the sense of awe that you get when you're in a place like this and you realize these things. Exodus 24, Moses wrote down, he went up to the mountain, talked to the Almighty. He wrote down all the words of Yah and rose up again early in the morning. He built an altar underneath the mountain and 12 pillars according to the 12 tribes of Israel. And they offered burnt offerings and sacrificed peace offerings of oxen unto Yah. Moses took half the blood, put it in the basins, half the blood he sprinkled on the altar that he had built. He took the book of the covenant, he read it in the audience of the people, and the people said, all that Yah said, we will do and be obedient. And Moses took the blood and then sprinkled it on the people and said, behold the blood of this covenant which Yahweh has made with you concerning all of these words. This is the place that the old covenant was sanctified. Right here at this altar that Moses built, right as it says, underneath the mountain, at the very shadow of the mountain. So let's go back to our data points. Test all things. There's got to be an altar there, right? And here you go. This is part of the altar of Moses. Now, the rocks in the foreground are not part of the altar. When Ron Wyatt first got there, he saw more than those. There used to be almost I'll call it a gazebo for lack of a better term, which those were sort of pillars in it. And it's believed that Solomon erected that. Just as he did the pillars at the sea crossing, he erected this, again, a gazebo, because I haven't seen a picture or a diagram of it specifically, to commemorate where the old covenant was sanctified. Okay, next. Oh, by the way, the Arabs since then have cut away the rest of Solomon's monument, and it's rumored that it became part of a mosque in Hakel. So, a little side note there. This is the entrance to the altar of Moses, where the people would have taken their oxen, their sacrifices, and walked towards the altar. This is about 70 feet long, going from here to that far end. And then it turns almost 90 degrees to the right, and then takes you towards the business end of the altar. Now, after Ron Wyatt had shown this area to the Saudi officials, they came back later with an archaeological team and did an excavation on this altar. When they were finished, they did not put everything back exactly the way they found it, because in Exodus it says this is an earthen altar with rocks if you desire. The dirt has been largely removed from this altar and the rocks have been built up. So this area would have been an earthen altar with rocks on top of it and to the sides, sort of an encasing. And when we were there the second time, Mary Nell noticed where the piles of dirt were. And so this isn't exactly like the altar of Moses was, but it is the same dimensions and location of it. Now, next picture here, at the bottom left, this is me sitting up again, looking down, and that bottom left circle shows you how I saw the altar of Moses from about 200 feet up on the mountain. You can see it's sort of an L shape. And the main picture is at the very foot of Mount Sinai, looking out towards Moses' altar. This is another picture almost turning around 180 degrees almost. You can see where the altar of Moses ends is the very end of the mountain of Sinai. The very end of the altar of Moses is the beginning of the mountain of Sinai. Everything's connected. All right, a little bit better picture from up above, just showing you how it looks from some more of a bird's eye view. It's about 70 by 75 or so, 70 feet by 75 feet. And the next slide shows you in this set-apart precinct by Mount Sinai where the altar of Moses is. The word says it'd be basically in the shadow of the mountain, right by the mountain, and there it is. Can we call this another data point? We can. Then he said unto Moses, come up unto Yah, you and 70 of the elders, and Aaron and his sons, and Joshua, and worship afar off, and Moses alone you shall come up to the top, but the elders, they shall not come up to the top with you, and neither shall the people go up with him. So everybody went up to the mountain and got to see the glory of Yah. The elders did, but they weren't allowed up to the top. And they had a dinner there and enjoyed the glory of Yah standing there in front of them. The chosen ones of Israel, there was not even one of them missing, and they appeared in the place of Elohim and did eat and drink. So, this is a mountain. This is not a hike. This is not a hill. Let's go to the next slide, please. We climbed up a large part of this mountain, and I'm telling you, this is a mountain climb. Now, I did it, but I was very nervous on a large part of this climb, being not liking heights. And you can see it's starting to already look like a long way down and a pretty steep incline. The next slide shows what we got to enjoy a climb upwards. Looks like fun, doesn't it? If you're a mountain goat. That was the easiest way up right there. It got worse on the other side. This is a view from a little higher up. As you can see, the mountain still slopes down, and it's a long way down if you slip, and you're going to slide and fall and going to be a very bad day. And up here, I made it. and made it to the place where we were going to go to. And you're looking all the way down to the plains, and then from this point in the very distance, you can see the campsite there. I don't have it marked off in blue, but it's right there in the middle of the picture there at the far point. So the elders had to walk up this very mountain also. And he told them to stay up there. Well, they're not going to stand on the side of a mountain enjoying the view, et cetera, et cetera. They need a place to rest and relax, right? Turns out that there is a plateau for the elders to rest and eat and drink in the very middle of this steep inclined mountain all over the rest of the mountain. One place. This plateau is bigger than you think. It's close to two football fields in length and width. This is huge. Just a picture from far away, but it's much larger than you would expect. But even this picture right there doesn't give you a place for them to really sit and eat and relax. They could run and play, but there's a secondary plateau up off to the left of it. And from this secondary plateau, I was amazed to see what looked like rows of benches and tables and places that they would sit and put their bowls or their cups or whatever else they had. And there's their picnic spot, their picnic table, and right in front of them is the glory of Yah, just like the scriptures say. Can you see a picnic table there? Yeah, it feels great to sit on and put your elbow up there, et cetera, et cetera. Pretty amazing, huh? All right, so this is a drone picture taken by my friend Andrew that shows the plateau. The drone went up obviously hundreds of feet, and you can't see the plateau from the base of the mountain, but when you rise up in elevation, once you get over that cliff face that we climbed up, you get over that, then you can see the plateau. All right, so then Moses alone shall come near Yahweh. And he said unto Moses, come up to me in the mountain and be there, and I will give you tables of stone and a law and commandments which I have written. And Moses rose up, and his minister Joshua. Moses went up into the mountain, and a cloud covered the mountain. And the glory of Yah abode upon Mount Sinai. And the sight of the glory of Yah was like devouring fire on the top of the mountain in the eyes of the children of Israel. Moses went right up into the midst of that cloud and that fire, and he was in the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. And when he was at the end of his stay at 40 days and 40 nights, Yah gave unto Moses 2 tables of testimony, tables of stone written by his very finger. This is where it happened, at this blackened mountainside. Somewhere up at the top of that mountain, there's a carving where 2 tables of stone were pulled out and written upon and handed to Moses. This is a closer up view of the blackened peak from the plateau. When you get this close, you really get an idea of it being called the burnt mountain, Jabal Machla. It looks like charcoal at the top. This is not an altered Photoshop picture. There's no photo editing, no colorization. This is a strict photo that came from my iPhone to this picture right there. This is actually what it looks like on a nice, clear, sunny day. From the drone shot, obviously the top of the mountain peak is the top of the mountain peak. That is the southern peak of Mount Sinai. All right, so Moses was up there 40 days and 40 nights, and the children saw that he was gone. They were getting a little restless. So the people gathered themselves together to Aaron and said, Aaron, make us some gods. And all the people broke off the golden earrings which were in their ears and brought them to Aaron, and he received them at their hand, fashioned with it, and made a molten golden calf. And when Aaron saw it, he built an altar before it, and Aaron made a proclamation and said, tomorrow is a feast to Yah. How did that go over? Yeah, so here is a picture of the golden calf altar. Right, next slide. That's the golden calf altar right there. Now, as it says in the bottom, I don't know if you can see it, the golden calf is not really still there. That is a Photoshop edit. I admit freely to that, okay? I put that up there, but the next picture shows you the original picture of the golden calf altar as it looks today. Now, let's bring out the scoffer point of view, right? This is just a big pile of rocks. There's nothing meaningful there. You can't tell that this was the golden calf altar. And then we say, let's look at the next slide where this is all fenced in. There's a circle of fence all the way around it. There's an old sign that was made just after Ron Wyatt went there, I'm sure, and a new sign that's just been put there a couple of years ago behind it, both designating this as another official archaeological site of Saudi Arabia. Now, they're not saying this is the golden calf altar of Exodus because, again, they're not as proud of their prophet in these times when he brought Israel back with him. But they do know that something very important has happened there, and they know even more, but they're just not telling everybody. Okay, so Saudi Arabia says so. What about any more evidence? Yes. When you get up to this altar, this pile of rocks, it is covered, literally covered with cow petroglyphs. And not just any cow petroglyphs. When you look at the horns on the cows, and they're very specific horns, and when you go back and look at historical Egypt and the pagan gods that they worshiped, there were two cow gods with two different sets of horns, and you're looking at them right there. So the children of Israel came out, they saw everything that Yah's done. Moses hadn't come back down for 40 days, and their faith was gone so fast that they put up the gods that they knew in Egypt and decided to make a feast to the old gods that they just saw destroyed through the plagues and everything else. This is a picture from the top of the golden calf altar looking towards Mount Sinai. So you can see they did this right in his face. Yeah. So the next slide shows you where the golden calf altar is from the mountain. Not to the border signs, not to the warning signs, a little bit further away, but still right in his face. Aaron made proclamation and said, "Tomorrow is a feast to Yah." And they rose up early on the morrow and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings. And the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. And Yah said unto Moses, this is his reaction to their feast unto him. Moses, get down there, for your people, they're not my people right now, they're your people, Moses, which you brought out of the land of Israel, Egypt, they have corrupted themselves. They have corrupted themselves. Therefore, Moses, leave me alone, that my wrath may wax hot against them, and that I might consume them. Moses, get out of my way. I'm going to kill them all, and I'm going to start over with you. They offered up a feast unto him on a different day than he appointed, using pagan symbols, and his reaction was, I'm going to destroy them all. And I just want everybody to think about the holidays that most of the Western world celebrates these days and see the direct correlation between the two. They're on different days than he appointed, and they all use ancient pagan symbols in the celebration of the feast. And what does Malachi 3:6 say? I am Yah, I change not. He hated it back then. He still hates it today. He's calling us out of that in these times, glory. Hallelujah. When Moses saw that the people had scattered, then stood Moses at the gate of the camp. This is after he had thrown down the 2 tables of stone that Yah had written with his very finger in anger, and he stood there. Who is on Yah's side? Let him come to me. Then all the sons of Levi came to him. Put on everyone his sword on his thigh and go through and slay everyone his brother and everyone his neighbor and everyone that is nearest to him. And the sons of Levi did as Moses spoke to them, and there fell of the people in that day 3,000 men. So not all of Israel was destroyed that day, as Yah threatened. And Moses talked him out of it. But 3,000 men did die, and they were the closest ones to the Levites. So that meant whenever the Levite got his sword, whomever had desecrated himself, whether as his family member or his neighbor or somebody he didn't know, whomever was nearest to him, they had to receive the punishment, because Yah is greater and more important than whom they know and whom they love, because they desecrated themselves. We have choices to make. Choose Yah in all things. So, 3,000 men died right here. At least 3,000. We don't know if any ladies or anybody else died, but 3,000 men died for sure. There has to be a large grave site in this area. And, of course, there is a large graveyard about 3 miles to the north of their campsite. Those are some of what we would say would be headstones. Most of them are just marked by big stones. There are some that have other markers that stand up like that. This area, again, is fenced in. This is just not a pile of rocks. Saudi Arabia says this is an archaeological site that you're not supposed to just enter. Something is there. It happens to be a large graveyard in a wilderness desert area where there's only been a few tents of Bedouin over the centuries and millennia. But there's a gravesite large enough for 3,000. Yeah. Going into it again, next picture, just another picture of it. And you can see on the right-hand picture, it looks like somebody took a metal detector in there and was digging for treasure. We found a grave site that had been dug up. So this graveyard happened to be where those mortars that I showed you before, this is where they were found. This is where the mortars that made the manna were found. And that's a head scratcher, isn't it? That's a head scratcher. Next picture. This is about how big the mortar is. That's my boot there. You get an idea. About 2 feet by 1.5 feet, usually about 6 inches or so, sometimes 8 deep. So that's a heavy stone. Think about how heavy that stone is. It would break a suitcase, probably 150, 200 pounds maybe, rough estimate. Now, think about this. That's another picture of another mortar that's out there. 3,000 men died in one day, right? What happens to the family of that man that died? They get assumed into the family of that man's brother or their relative. That family unit ceases to exist when the man dies. The women and the children go to another man. Each family would have had a mortar to make bread every day, right? So when that family goes in and joins that other family, there's already a mortar there that they're using to make bread. And then Yah is leading him on a wilderness journey for 40 years. And how many of those 600,000 men had cattle or donkeys or a cart even to pull along everything that they had to take from one campsite to another? And think about how much they would have had to carry. If it was you and you knew you had to leave, would you take an extra 150-pound rock and put it on your back to travel to the next campsite, or would you just leave it with the remnants of that old family unit? Ron Wyatt used to say, apply common sense to these things, because they were just people and they would apply common sense to this. Pretty incredible, huh? All right, where are we? Next slide. Water from the mountain. Exodus 32. This is part of the punishment for the golden calf altar. It came to pass that Moses' anger waxed hot, and he took that calf which they had made, and he burned it in the fire. He ground it to powder, and then strawed it upon the water, and made the children of Israel drink it. Exodus 32. Deuteronomy 9 is the second witness. It said, I took your sin, the calf which you had made, and burned it with fire, stamped it, ground it very small, until it was small as dust. And I cast that dust thereof into the brook that descended out of the mountain. Physical evidence right there has got to be there. If this is Mount Sinai, it says that there has to be a brook that descends out of the mountain, and you're looking at the brook bed that descends out of the mountain of Sinai. That brook bed comes to the south side of the mountain and then turns and goes up to the mountain where it ends. The brook bed is about between 15 and 20-ish feet deep and decently wide, 30, 40 feet-ish in different places. Now, the rocks at the bottom of it are again different than the rest of the rocks around the mountain ranges in Saudi. They have a lot of evidence of water erosion. This is not just a little ditch in the ground. This is where a lot of water had fallen and traveled over in the past. Now, close to those brooks are some seep wells, and this is really important. Okay, this is one of the wells that was found, and there's another rock formation around the other. Most of these wells have been covered over by the silt and dirt since then. But this was one that was dug out, and there's an amazing story that Ron or Mary Nell tells about this that you can find on their site. But this is where the seep wells are in this next picture, because not only was there a brook that descended out of the mountain, there was also a lake. And it looked like it's a man-made lake. And these seep wells were right by where the lake was. Now, if you think about this, let's use common sense again. The children of Israel were here for over a year. They were going to drink here every day. So they made a lake because they were not allowed in to the special area, the set-apart precinct, so they drank from the lake from the outside. They also had cattle, and they had to lead the cattle up to drink. And what do cattle do when they drink from a lake? So the children of Israel probably wouldn't have wanted to drink from the same water that the cattle were in. So what they did is they built these seep wells right beside the lake where the water would seep through the ground, through the rocks, and it would do just what you would think it would do. It cleansed the water. By the time it got into the well, it's fresh water for the people of Israel to drink. There's evidence of all this here. This is where the brook bed is. That's my hand. That's my best hand drawing of that. It's close. It's not exact. On the next slide shows you the drone picture again, and now you can see the brook bed. Now that I've lined it up, you can see where it was by the shadows and the ravine. That's your brook bed. Going right up to the mountain, and then it sort of hooks right. All right. Yah said to Moses, speak unto the children of Israel, and take the first fruits of all, who may be disposed in their hearts to give, and you shall take my first fruits. And this is the offering which you shall take of them, gold and silver and brass, and you shall make me a sanctuary. And I will appear among you, and you shall make for me according to all things which I show you in the mountain, even the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all its furniture, so you shall make it. There's throne in heaven, and everything's up there, and Moses got to see it, and Yah said, make me a tabernacle that looks like this. And Moses said, yes, sir. Yah said to Moses, behold, I've called upon Bezalel, and I've filled him with the divine spirit of wisdom, again, the set-apart spirit showing up in the Old Testament, and understanding and knowledge to invent in every work, to labor in gold and silver and brass and works in stone, works in wood, to work in all works, because he's got to build a whole tabernacle. The sanctuary, just a picture of it, a diagram, I should say, bigger than you would first imagine. So they had a lot of work to do, a lot of fabric to make, a lot of pillars, a lot of posts, a lot of pins, not even talking about what's inside the tabernacle, the menorah and those things, the table of showbread. They had a lot of work to do. Another picture, this is an exhibit that was done last year in Tennessee, which is a very beautiful exhibit of the inside of the tabernacle of Moses, as best as they can do it inside a building. So it was just really beautiful. I just wanted to give you an idea, and I'm sure the real tabernacle is even more stunning than this on the inside, because the acacia wood wouldn't have been flat for the walls. It would have been grouped together, and so the light of the menorah in there would have been scattered among it, so it would have been scatter lights of gold going through there, starbursts of gold. I can't imagine it even describing it to you, but that would have been my best representation of it. So, don't go to the next one. Oh, sorry. So, I'll just cut to the chase. That up till now, we've shown you everything that's happened in the Exodus journey, and we have data points for all of it. We have physical evidence for all of it. And a scoffer could still point to the fact that they had to build stuff there. They had to have a metalworks area to build these things, and it's not there. So this is still all just a coincidence. You're not batting 100% on all the evidence around Sinai, so I say that none of it's real. Well, on December 15th, 2022, we found the metalworks area. So when we were out there, we were driving around. We had just looked at the wilderness campsite area, and it was towards the end of the day, and this was both to see the sights and explore. It was built as that type of trip out there, and if we found anything interesting, we'd go look at it as long as we wanted to. At the end of this day, we were just going to travel out one of the wadis that we think might have been the exit for the children of Israel when they left Sinai for their then 39-year journey-ish. And as we're driving along, one of the guys in the car happened to look over and said, "Look at that, that's interesting." And we all looked up and said, "Yeah, that sure is. Let's stop and look at it." Exploration time is on. So we get up there, we're looking around. One of the other guys said, "Come over here and look at this." The picture of the right, and said, "Yeah, that's not natural. That looks really weird. It's not natural." Then another one of the guys came up and said, "You know, I've seen something like this in Armenia. This is a stone slab form." And then at that point, something hit me, and I just looked to the left and said, "And that's the furnace," and we're standing in the metalworks area where they built the tabernacle of Moses. It just hit me all at once, and I had no idea why I said it. And then me, in my past life, I was an engineer. I started thinking, okay, why did I say that? How does this make sense? And so I went over and looked at that furnace, and you can see it's hollow. It's really almost a perfect design for a furnace that would heat a precious metal. For a precious metal to be melted, you can't just build a campfire. You have to have special conditions. You have to have additional pressure. You have to have the fuel right with the oxygen regulated to keep a specific temperature to melt gold. Gold melts about 1948 degrees, for example. You have to keep that temperature. Campfires aren't there. So This furnace happens to be a perfect design to melt a precious metal like gold. That stone form is about 18 to 20 feet away from that furnace. Back up one, please. So if you think about it, we're using common sense again. Bazaleel and his guys are melting the gold right there in the furnace. They have to take it to the stone form. They don't want to walk too far because the gold could start cooling and solidifying. They don't want it to be too close either, for obvious reasons, a little hot around the furnace. So they walk 20 feet away and they pour the gold into those stone forms. Okay, this is the size of that stone form that we first followed, the first stone form that we found. You can see it's about 3 to 4 feet across. Now, somebody might say, you can't make things from that. You can pour gold in there, but you're just going to get a lump. And maybe the best you could do would be pour a pin in there. There were certain forms that we found later that looked like you could form a pin in there or a hook or something, but you can't make a pomegranate out of that. You can't make anything special out of that. This is not a metalworks area. Okay, let's go back to common sense again, right? We didn't just find one furnace that day. We found 5. So why would you have 5 furnaces? Well, number one, you have 3 metals that they're making, right? Gold, silver, brass / bronze. What could the other 2 be for? Well, what did most of us do in middle school or high school one day? We went into class and we went to a kiln and we took some clay and we made it into a cute little sculpture and we put it into the kiln furnace and it came out as a ceramic. And it probably looked pretty bad for most of us. Mine would look pretty bad, I know, for me. But somebody much more skilled than me, such as Bazaleel, could take the sand around Sinai, put water on it, form it up into something very beautiful, a form, a cup almost that would hold molten gold or silver that you'd pour in it, and then you'd place it right there into that form, which would perfectly hold your ceramic form. And when the gold cooled, you'd simply take the form out, you'd chip away the ceramic, and then you have a beautiful golden pomegranate, for example. That's how they did it, in part. Right by there is what we call the break room. So we were exhausted. I was overwhelmed. Bob and I sat down there, one of my friends, and I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, Bob, we just found the break room. Because this is where they would have sat. It felt amazing. They're perfect chairs. You can see the chairs right there. It's perfect to put your elbows on, relax, lean back, and you have a perfect view of the furnace to make sure the fire is still burning hot. You have a perfect view of the stone form to make sure you know when it's time to get them and do the next set of forms. As I mentioned, we found 5 furnaces in total. That's 2 more furnaces up above there. And we found on the second trip many stone forms. We found 2 on the first trip before we were just too overwhelmed to do anything more, and it was getting dark. The second trip, we found close to 20, somewhere in the ballpark of 20 stone forms. And the thing was, all of these stone forms were very close to each of the furnaces, just as they would be expected to be. This is where they made these things. And you should make the Ark of Testimony, the Ark of the Covenant of incorruptible wood, the length of 2.5 cubits, the breadth 1.5 cubits, the height 1.5 cubits. You shall make 2 cherubs graven in gold, and you shall put them on both sides of the mercy seat. The cherubs shall stretch forth their wings above, overshadowing the mercy seat with their wings, and their faces should be towards each other. The faces of the cherubs shall be towards the mercy seat. That's Exodus 25. That is a picture right there that was made by an artist that was overseen by Ron Wyatt. So you've seen a whole bunch of other representations of the Ark of the Covenant. Most of them have the wings right on the mercy seat. Now, if you think about what the mercy seat really is and the Ark of the Covenant, the most set-apart place, right? That's his earthly throne. Truth spoken, the same as in heaven. The pattern of his throne is this ark. So you would not have the wings of the cherubim sitting in the middle of the mercy seat and sitting in the middle of where the priest, the high priest on the Day of Atonement, is supposed to come 7 times with the blood of calves and goats. Okay, so just throw out everything you've seen that has wings on top of the mercy seat. It is incorrect. Now, as we were there, hang on for a second, Carl. As we were there, we're looking around because we're stunned already. We're stunned that we found this. And then Bob, the one who found the first stone form, he said, "Guys, come here and look at this. This is really strange." Everybody walks over there. I'm the last one over there. And as soon as I see it, I said, "This is the stone form where they made the wing of the cherubim of the Ark of the Covenant right there." And it just came out of my mouth. Carl, please. So, I was too stunned that day to do too much engineering at that point. I was just beside myself, like a short circuit, if you will. I did not think. I was just there, overwhelmed and stunned. Fortunately, after we got back, we looked through the pictures, and one of the pictures had Bob's boot standing right beside the stone form. At which point, I was not so stunned anymore, and I could go, okay, I know how big the Ark of the Covenant has to be. If this is truly the stone form of the wing of the cherubim, it has to be a specific size. Because it's 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 foot deep. A royal cubit, is 20.62 inches, and that's verified by the 300 cubits of Noah's Ark, which equates to 515 feet as it is currently measured. So we know exactly how big the cubits that they used was back then. Doing calculations, math stuff, I figured out that the wing of the cherubim had to be a little bit over 36 inches in a linear line from the base to the very tip to meet the angle and the length of the Ark of the Covenant. And you can see Bob's boot. It's a typical boot. He's not Goliath, so it's about 1 foot long. And you put 3 of Bob's boots together, as I do in that line, you have about 36 inches. That data point, right? Next picture. This is a better view of the stone form used to make a hammered cherub wing for the Ark of the Covenant. Okay, this is not a poured form like the others were. This is where they would pour like a slab of concrete or a slab of gold. Think of a rectangle of gold that they would pour, and then they would take that before it's fully solid, and they would place it over that form, and then they would hammer it so the details of that stone form were then imprinted upon the wing of the cherubim. Now, you can see at the bottom of that, I don't know, Carl, can you blow that up any? Okay, so you see at the bottom of that stone wing, you can see the lines going down. Those are the feathers of the wings of the cherubim. Now, if you go up to the top and it curves around and turns sideways, you can see, especially when you get up to the form, you can see those lines continuing along the top, the horizontal plane of this stone form. The feathers continued all the way from the shoulder to the tip. Now, that's after 3,400 years plus of natural erosion, and we can still see evidence of that top plane that's been weathered by sun, wind, and rain for over 3,000 years. And plenty of evidence on the downslope where the erosion is not going to be nearly so bad. That all matches up. Another picture. This is, again, the model that Ron Wyatt said was closest to what he saw when he went into the cave and saw the Ark of the Covenant. And most people will believe everything else that Ron Wyatt says. But some people stop at this and he couldn't have found out. He couldn't have found out. He wasn't a scientist. He wasn't a professional archaeologist. He just had a heart to serve and was called to go look at Noah's Ark. And then he found the next thing. And he found the next thing. And he found the next thing. It is not of his work and his intelligence that he found these things. And he would say that, and Mary Nell would say that. It was Yah Almighty that directed him to each of these places, and nobody else had found these places before him. And if he had found all of these places, and you can see his heart in his video and the Spirit pouring through him, did he not find the Ark of the Covenant also? Yes, he did. This is his only physical evidence of what he saw. We can't see the pictures yet. We can't see the video yet. That's coming. But this model shows the way the wing is formed also. We know the links of it. The links match up. But this model that he said is closest to the representation of the ark that he saw has a wing that curves around. Now, we did some LiDAR scans, and this, I'm going to preview, this is probably going to come out in an upcoming video that Marianelle is doing right now. But we did some LiDAR scans and some other measurements, and we saw, I don't think I have it, but the bottom of that wing is touching the ground, and then the top of that wing is up here. If you can see my arm, it's sort of the same way. So this is the bottom of the wing, and then it curves up. And if you think about taking that and putting it on the back of the shoulder of that cherubim, it matches up. Again, the curvature of this stone form, when you see it, and you can see it from its true dimensions and not just a picture, it matches the model that Ron Wyatt said it would be. He didn't live to see that he was validated for even finding the Ark of the Covenant. The evidence has been found to show that what he said was there, it's there. And if it's there, the meaning of the Ark of the Covenant under the crucifixion site blows your mind. Has this ever been you? Have you ever doubted anything? Doubting Thomas sitting right there with Messiah in front of him, and he said, I gotta poke my hand in your ribs to believe it's you. There's many people in the world that need evidence to bring their faith to fulfillment, right? We're seeing his final evidence coming out in these days. Everything that Ron Wyatt did, others that have also done things, and this latest discovery of the metalworks and even the stone form wing of the cherubim of the Ark of the Covenant. It's all evidence that's come out. In these very days, according to his timeline, he's calling out to the world right now. Time's running out. You gotta see this, because we have things like Noah's Ark. It's real. Like I said, I've been there. I've seen the deck joists sticking out of the ground horizontally, look like telephone poles have been broken off every 9 or 10 feet, petrified wood. It all matches up, and I know some of you have been there and seen some of the artifacts. Sodom and Gomorrah, Ron Wyatt found that as well. If you've ever been to Israel, you ever went to Masada, you drove right through Gomorrah to get there, and you didn't know it because it's right there. You can see up at the top, that's a sphinx that they had back in the days. The bottom left is a ziggurat, and the bottom right is perfect for the way that the Canaanites used to build their buildings. And it's all just a pile of ash, but it used to be Gomorrah right there. Pool of Siloam, that's been uncovered. 2004 when they did that, and now they're fully excavating it. Glory. Love to see that fully excavated. It's over 1.25 acres big. Things are bigger than we think they are. We think of a swimming pool when we think of Pool of Siloam. 1.25 acres is this pool. all of Israel had to come here during the feasts and sanctify themselves, cleanse themselves, purify themselves before they walked up the step to get to the temple. In the same way that the people had to wash their clothes for 2 days before he came down on the third day, and we have to purify ourselves before we go up to heavenly Zion. Another shadow picture. And of course, the last one and the most famous one still is the garden tomb. And if you look at that in detail and you go there, again, everything matches exactly to the very details that all the Gospels said it would be. That is where our Messiah was buried, and 3 days later, on the third day, he arose and walked out that door. And that is, I'm not going to do that one, Carl, so just flip to the end. That is the evidence that he's given us in Saudi Arabia for the Exodus journey. It's overwhelming, isn't it? This is something that the world needs to see. So try to share it with friends and family, people that might be scoffing, somebody that needs just a little bit of physical evidence to come into belief. Because Ron didn't do those things for his own glory or for money. He sowed his job, everything he bought, everything he made into the next trip. He didn't die a rich man. He died just normal. He put everything into his work. I'm not sitting up here asking for anything. I'm sharing this with everybody so that you can then share it to others, and maybe it'll reach one person, maybe just one, that needs to see this, that needs to see the evidence of Sinai, that brings them over the edge that they may be saved. And that is Sinai, the burnt mountain. Thank you, everyone. We'll be back in a little bit. Oh, I guess aren't we? Were we going to do questions? Either way, whatever everybody wants to do. Do we have the rock back?